Hi, everybody. Today's Tuesday, February 10th, 2026, and our dear friend, our brother, Carl Wilkerson, is here with us.
Hmm.
Welcome back, Larry.
Good to be with you, Nima.
Let me start, Larry, with please hit the like button, helping us reaching more people. And I want to start, Larry, with what we were discussing before coming to live about Netanyahu and his visit to the United States. He wants to talk with Donald Trump and his administration. Most probably, he wants to convince them to attack Iran or somehow some sort of guarantees for Israel. If Israel decides to attack first, how do you find what is he seeking for, in your opinion?
Exactly what you said. I think he's already been rebuffed in a certain way. He's not being allowed to stay in Blair House, which is almost, for the Israeli prime minister, a given. And I don't think Donald Trump is inclined to be very friendly with him. At the same time, that I don't see how he can work his way out of this. He's got a situation going now that he set up essentially, I think, and I do believe this, essentially to put Netanyahu in a box and to work out some sort of arrangement with Iran that wouldn't include a major conflict. Maybe they were talking on the sides about, or at least the United States was suggesting that, oh, we'll drop a few bombs and you drop a few bombs and we'll make sure we coordinate the targets and everything, and then we'll call it quits. And that'll be all we need to do. Iran, I don't think, wanted anything to do with that either, understanding how much the United States was to be distrusted in even that. And I don't think Netanyahu was letting the signals out that he accepted anything like that either. So now they're going to have sort of a, put their heads together meeting, I guess, and the heads are going to be bruised as they come together. And Netanyahu is going to insist, and I'm told, I have no way of verifying this, Nima, but I'm told by people with whom I have discussed these sorts of things in the past, and I've found them to be reliable, that Netanyahu is going to bring Epstein files with him. That is to say, he's going to bring things that he can expose Donald Trump is associated with, or Donald Trump's family is associated with. I come to Melania really quickly. And that he's going to use those, if he has to convince Trump to do exactly what Bibi wants him to do. So I have no idea how this is going to come out. I don't for a minute think Trump has the gumption and the courage and the wisdom, really, the smartness, I should say, not wisdom, to defy Netanyahu in a very clever way and maybe tell him one thing and then do another. But I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. But I think we're looking at what I didn't think we were looking at, an actual use of this force that we've marshaled around Iran. And so what we're looking at also is a devastating attack on Israel. Bibi is going to get everything he's asking for and more, and probably an attack on regional assets of the United States. I think Iran is, once it starts, if we really start it in a flagrant fashion, Iran is going to give us everything they got. And when I say us, I mean Israel and us in the region. So we're looking at the potential for a conflict that gets completely out of control, becomes regional really fast, and then bleeds into Ukraine and other conflicts that are potentially awaiting a start right now, particularly with Russia. And Russia and China steaming into the region to join in, as it were. We're looking at a general war, which is not a good prospect for the planet.
Larry, do you feel that some people within the Trump administration are aware of what is the risk of a new war in the Middle East and the escalation of the war, the continuation of the war? I would assume that this sort of war would be a war of attrition, as we see in Ukraine. And How about that? How do they have any sort of understanding on that, or they want to do something so quick, which, in my opinion, is not possible? The way that I'm seeing what is happening in the mind of the decision makers in Iran.
Well, the military, at least some of them, the colonels, the lieutenant colonels who are still on active duty and haven't left, are aware of just how difficult this situation is in any configuration you give it. What you might call a limited attack, or all the way out to a no holds barred attack. Every single perturbation in between that limited attack and the all out attack has its own disadvantages. And in each case, with the exception of perhaps the ones that I heard they were working on, that is, I'll do this and you do that, I'll do this and you do that, then we'll call it quits. That probably could have been worked out as it was before. I think it actually was that way before. But any other permutation between the limited attack and the all out attack that is genuine, that isn't pre coordinated, as it were, that's going to be a disaster in its own making. And I would say is probably going to lead up the escalation ladder to the general attack and the general conflagration. Russia and China just might be in it. Certainly, Russia might be in it. And China's going to be right there with them in terms of this exercise that they're sending warships to perform in the very vicinity of the U.S. naval forces. And you've got the possibility of all kinds of missiles flying through the air, missiles that are capable of sinking these warships, aircraft carriers, and other things such as that. It's not a good situation to be developing, and I hope, to get to your question again, the Pentagon has people who understand this. They understand that this is not an easy game, as it were, and it might be a very difficult game out of which they do not extract themselves very quickly. And there are other things that they have on their agenda that will be impacted majorly if this becomes an all-out war. Remember how we went into Iraq in 2003? We went in there with too few forces. We will definitely do that with Iran. We went in there with no comprehension of the people in whom we were going to be working, with whom we were going to be working. That'll be absolutely true in this region with Iran, and it'll be antagonistic across the board. And we went in there with no comprehension and no plan for the aftermath, for what was going to happen once the initial shock and awe wore off. We'll be doubly that, triply that with Iran. So, what is down the road from that? Disaster. I don't see any other way to describe it. Disaster for both sides, which is what makes this such a terrible proposition. The only good thing that might come out of this, Nima, the only good thing is the elimination of the state of Israel.
It seems that Netanyahu knows that, and he wants to risk it even before leaving power in Israel.
I would be hard pressed to disagree with you. I would be hard pressed. I think he's got it on his bucket list as the last thing to do, and that if he doesn't do it, he'd just as soon die in the process of not doing it. And so he's willing to commit suicide over this last and final act of his extended presidency, premiership, leadership, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. It says we had some sort of, in the news, we've learned that Netanyahu will ask, Donald Trump to give Israel permission for freedom of military act. It seems that even he wants to propose to Donald Trump, if they reach some sort of agreement, they have to give the permission. Let's go the other way. You have to give the permission to Israel that they can attack Iran anytime, any moment they decide to attack.
Go
This
ahead.
is
Go
it's
ahead. Sorry, that was my phone interfering.
Yeah. Larry, this is what's happening in the mind of Netanyahu, it seems. Do you think that if something, let's assume that in the negotiations getting somewhere. I don't know. Today we had the head of Security Council of Iran going to Oman, then to Qatar. He talked with the commander of, Ansarullah in Yemen. He was warning the Trump administration about Netanyahu's visit to the United States, not to be manipulated by Netanyahu. And I don't know if there is somebody in Washington to understand, to hear what the Iranian side is talking about.
Well, I think the Omanis there are good offices in the region, and there are other people in the region's good offices too, which simply means they're the most trustworthy intermediary for any side in any conflict that involves that region. And for them to be as disquieted as they are with regard to this is a significant indicator that we might be headed into hell. And I don't put it, I would, if I were that entourage of diplomats in Oman, and particularly the foreign minister, who has very decisively said, very differently from everyone else in the world, in this business in Southwest Asia or in the United States, that Israel is the main problem in the region. They're probably as frustrated as anybody else. They don't see anything that they can do about this other than continue to offer their good offices and continue to talk to all sides. And this includes the Arab countries too, not just Iran and not just the United States. And they're literally pulling their hair out because they're at a point now where they see what you and I see, what we've been talking about, and they don't see any way to get out of it. And they know, I think, that this is going to be disastrous. And it's not just disastrous for one side or the other, it's disastrous for everybody. It's even disastrous for them and for the countries around them. It's not anything of an advantage to any party in this, which is what makes this so stupid, ultimately. Not just the fact that Iran is no threat to the United States and we're threatening to attack them, not just the fact that Scott Bessent has made an absolute Netanyahu-like character of himself by bragging about the sanctions that are bringing Iranian children to their knees, not just the fact that the United States has been at this ever since the Shah fell, not just the fact that our sanctions are acts of war, repeatedly acts of war, and Iran has every right to respond to that with an act of war, not just the fact that the United States is a bigger power than Iran, but not just the fact, too, that Iran has an advantage here because of its position in the region. It's built up over the last 20 years, especially the last 10, its capabilities now, and its allies now. This is kind of like what Barbara Tuchman talked about in the March to Folly. This is kind of like every respondent here, every co-belligerent here, every party here, except for the diplomats like the Omanis trying to stop this, is marching up to it with open eyes but no brain. And if we go ahead with this in any fashion or form that is what we would call decisive or attempting to make it so, it's going to be a disaster. And when you do that, Nima, in military parlance, you start out and then you don't get what you want. So you double down and then you triple down and you quadruple down. Well, about the point you hit the triple down, the United States runs out, just runs out. We don't have any more. So if Iran persists, if Iran hangs in there, and in the meantime is destroying the state of Israel, utterly destroying the state of Israel, what do we do? What do we do at the end of that? We've devastated Iran for the moment, probably. I mean, they can go underground. We're not going to kill too many of 90 million people. We're going to kill a appreciable amount, though. And they're going to do some major damage to Saudi Arabia, major damage to the world oil markets, major damage to our Navy, major damage to our Air Force, major damage, as I said, probably eliminate Israel. Hopefully, Israel won't turn to a nuclear weapon when they get to that point. Who knows? Who's going to win in this? Where's the victor?
Yeah. Exactly. That's a good question. I think excellent question. Here is what Donald Trump moments ago said, that Iran will not possess nuclear weapons nor ballistic missiles. It's unbelievable. And the reporter asked him, Larry, are you now saying that Iran has to give up its ballistic missile program? And he answered, yes, and they cannot have nuclear weapons. I don't know if he knows what he's talking about anymore.
I've thought that for a long time, Nima. I've thought that for a long time. I'm not sure he knows what he's talking about at any given moment, about any given subject. He does not know what he's talking about. He has no brief because no one gives him a brief. And if they give him a brief, he discards it and goes out and says whatever comes to his luscious moral mind, as he called it. I don't know how you deal with a person like that if you're on the other side of the bargaining table. And it must be extremely frustrating for people in Moscow and in Tehran, and for that matter, elsewhere in the world. I was on a webinar this morning with Quincy Institute, and we were talking about the EU. And we were talking about essentially what the EU is trying to do with respect to Bulgaria. We had a Bulgarian politician on the show, very articulate woman. We had Wolfgang Streeck on the show, and we had Lord Sadelsky on the show. And it was one of the best webinars I've ever listened to. But it was, again, an explanation of how screwed up, in this case, Europe, in the EU in particular, but how screwed up the world is because, and partly as the responsibility of this administration. Now, it didn't just start with them. It started with Joe Biden. It started earlier than that. It started back when Papa Bush was eliminated from the entourage and we got all these idiot presidents. But nonetheless, they've got the same angst over Europe that I have right now over Southwest Asia. We didn't even talk about Southwest Asia. But it seems to me like we're at another position that is very similar for different reasons and in different circumstances of power, certainly, that we were in 1913, 1914. We got a march to folly. We've got leaders who don't know what they're doing. We've got advisors to those leaders who have ulterior motives, most of them based in money and finances. And we've got a dark web encircling them all, and we're going to kill a lot of people. And we're going to do it with our various militaries. And of course, we've been killing people with our sanctions for so long now that I don't blame the Iranians for wanting to strike back at us. This is, you can't make this stuff up, as I've said so many times. We are really looking at and on top of all of that, they brought up this morning, and one of the speakers brought up the fact that we now are without any nuclear treaties whatsoever. Yeah. And then someone brought up the fact that Donald Trump wants to enter this field of no nuclear weapons treaties, and allowed all this to happen on his watch, primarily START going and INF treaty before, because he wants a whole new regime. Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's what I've been saying all along. We need a whole new regime, and we need to include China in it. We need to include other nuclear states and eventually all the nuclear states. And he seems to say that he wants that. Okay, how is this, what we're talking about right now, Nima, going to aid and abet that process? We got a guy in the Middle East named Bibi, who's in Washington right now, who might be the first to use a nuclear weapon in anger since we did in 1945. And we're talking with our president about a whole new nuclear weapons regime, treaties for everyone, and so forth. This is absurd. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing.
Larry, do you think that the Trump administration, do they have some sort of division within the administration, or you see the administration going hand in hand? They're unified. They know what they want from the from the conflict in the West Asia.
Nima, you just put your finger on, I think, one of the very most prominent and debilitating deficiencies of the Trump administration. And let me explain what I mean by that. Your question is there unanimity in security and foreign policy? Yes, there is, but it's sycophancy. It's a bunch of people saying there's unanimity because they are sycophants and because they're scared to death of Donald Trump. And that's from Tulsi Gabbard to Pete Hegseth to Pam Bondi to Kash Patel to Besant, you name them. They're all scared of Trump. So there is unanimity. There is conformity. They all agree. Underneath, there's probably a battle going on amongst many of them in their cohorts because they think he's insane. But you're not going to get anybody to say that, especially since it looks like that the midterms are going to be a colossal loss for the Republican Party. You're not going to get anybody to say that. Maybe when we get to the point where almost 50%, if not more, of the Republicans now in the Senate and the House understand they're probably going to lose their position, maybe then someone will wake up and cause a little cohesion to occur and a counter movement to occur. Right now, you've only got people like Tom Massey and one or two others who are saying things, and they're saying things in many cases because they're leaving, not going to be around. But if they keep looking at the polls closely and the polls keep going down, 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 and down, and there's no anticipation, and I hope to hell there isn't an anticipation of Trump postponing the midterms and declaring that they're null and void or whatever, then there's got to be a reaction. But at the time present, no one is willing to brook him. No one is willing to stand up and say, Mr. Emperor, you are naked. You have no clothes on. Do you understand the problems you've created for us? No, they're not willing to say that. So there is unanimity across the administration. You even have Tulsi Gabbard, of all people, acting as the prime sycophant. There's nothing I've done that is wrong, and there's nothing Donald Trump has done that's wrong. Well, and we're getting along fine.
Yeah.
And throw in Melania's documentary, and it almost makes you ill. It almost makes you ill. And then to understand that that documentary was probably attached to and part and parcel of the whole problem here, which is to get everyone's attention off of Epstein. I'm convinced that's what Trump's bellicose procedures are, is attempts to get us off of Epstein. He doesn't like what's happening with Epstein, either because of his wife, because of himself, or both.
Do you think that Netanyahu is using that against Donald Trump?
I do. I think Netanyahu is probably coming to Washington with his premier information and will use that information to influence Donald Trump. If Donald Trump proves recalcitrant, he will flash that information at him and threaten to reveal it. No question in my mind. I don't have any source, but I've watched this for long enough, and I've watched Bill Clinton with Monica Lewinsky and, that business in 78 days of bombing Serbia. And I've watched other presidents who use things to get attention off of other things that were hurting them enough to know that that's probably part of what's happening right now. He does not want what is happening now slowly, incrementally, to go any further, because ultimately it's going to damage him, his wife, some of other members of his family, or some of the people who are donating heavily to his campaigns, or all of the above. That's got to be part of his motivation. Otherwise, I can't explain it.
Yeah. Larry, today we've seen the Chinese military ambassador he presented the commander of Iranian Air Force with a model of the J-20 stealth fighter. I was watching, does it mean that they gave Iran J-20 stealth fighter? What does that mean? It's a symbolic sort of gesture. I don't know.
Well,
How can you?
it it's just a gesture in my view, because aircraft that sophisticated, and in fact, almost any fourth, fifth, sixth generation aircraft today, or something even beyond that, it takes a long time
Mhm.
to learn how to operate it, to be skilled enough to use it to its even three-quarters of its potential. So giving somebody something right now in the mouth of war, as it were, is no good at all. It's all going to depend on what China has already given Iran with time to train and get used to the equipment, and what Russia has already given Iran in the same respect, and how many of their own technical personnel they're willing to leave on the ground there to possibly die in order to operate things if they haven't gotten very far with it. So anything coming in now, just like these ships coming into the North Arabian Sea to do an exercise, Russian and Chinese, note how they are timed to come in. It looks to me like after the fray or in conjunction with barely the end of the fray, if there is an end. That's one of my concerns, that this is going to be endless because no one's going to win. Everyone's going to lose. That's the major proposition that we're looking at. Everyone's going to lose. Israel may disappear. We may have the first use of a nuclear weapon since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And Iran's going to take major damage, and the region's going to take major damage. The world is going to take major damage because oil prices are going to skyrocket. All of these things are potential outcomes of just a cursory exchange of armaments. So, what if we have a big, heavy one? What if the United States has to reinforce? What if the United States winds up? And I would predict this. I would predict this if we really go in for a major attack on Iran. What if the United States has to commit 90% of its armed forces to this conflict? I mean, that's what we're looking at here. Everything the United States has is going to have to be brought to bear on Iran, virtually everything. And it's still not going to do what we want it to do. So the prospects here are just legion for disaster.
Yeah. Larry, when I was in Iran, I had the opportunity to talk with one of my friends. Had a cousin who was trained for Su-35. I asked him, how old is he? He said 18 years old, and he's prepared. He was totally prepared to
Well, they've
to.
been there for a while.
It's
They
been
yeah.
yeah.
Su-35s, the new equipment training team, and some of the planes have been there for quite a while.
Yeah.
So
It
they
seems
they
that
probably, you could probably stand up a squadron in, if you really went 24/7, round the clock, double shifts on your maintenance people and everything else. You could probably stand a squadron up in 6 or 7 months.
yeah. I think, Larry, the Middle East is right now, because we learned that the Iranian foreign minister was talking with Egypt, with Turkey, with all these players, important players in the Middle East, informing what has happened with the negotiations, the new negotiation, the new round of negotiation between Iran and the United States. How important is that for the Iranian foreign policy, and why is that happening? We have, as I mentioned before, we have the head of national security of Iran, going to other countries and talking with them. What is happening on the part of the diplomatic, movement on the part of Iran?
Well, there's three ways to interpret that, and then you have to parse the three ways with each of the countries visited. For example, what's said in Turkey will be different from what's said in Beijing. What's said in Islamabad will be different elsewhere. And I would say there are two or three aspects of it that probably pertain to this particular situation. One, Iran is seeking help in terms of bringing the influence of that country to bear on the United States, and to do what they can to stop an attack. Two, to talk, and this depends on the country, and you can almost put the country in the column you want to. Two, to ask them for help. And the help might be in the form of resupplies, missiles, armaments, whatever. Might even be in with a couple of these countries. And I don't discount Turkey in this regard. It might even be for help in terms of fighting on the ground, not necessarily in infantry components, but with pilots and things like that. Three, it might be money. It might be, we need money to do this, and would you be willing to give us a loan here, a loan there? And four, it might be actually seeking more allies in every component of what Iran might wind up doing if this goes on for a long period of time. And I think it has every prospect of being a long-term conflict with no winners apparent for 6 to 8 months, unless a nuclear weapon is used, and then all bets are off. I don't know where we go there. So it's different with each of these countries. It's more significant probably with Russia because they actually have a signed pact, a signed defense pact, security pact. And it's probably different with China too, because China is increasingly seeing its interests being affected and embroiled with regard to the strait and with regard to the region in general. So, and I should say there's another signal, and that's the diplomats want to show the United States that Iran has other places to go and other people to talk to, and even other friends. And that's demonstrative of their effort to build a group of countries, at least, that look on what Iran is going to do under compulsion of the United States with some favor, and will lend their good offices wherever they can. So there are all manner of reasons for Iran to be going out and doing these things. I would say that the countries that are most important in this, though, are Russia and China.
There was an interview, Larry, with the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. It was on CNN Turk, and the reporter asked him, "Can the Iranian regime be overthrown by extensive U.S. airstrikes?" And the response was, "No, it wouldn't collapse." The estimate on the part of the Turkish government, and it seems to me the estimation on the part of other Arab states in the Persian Gulf, they're having the same sort of estimation. And considering all of that, one of when I was in Iran, I was asking the people, how do you feel about America, the United States attacking Iran? One of them asked me a simple question. He said, "So what? They're gonna what do they want to do? They want to bomb. Where do they want to bomb? And how's that going to influence anything?" I was somehow, so I didn't know how to respond to him. I tried to somehow go in around the question to do something about it, but he was simply asking me the right question. What else can they do?
Well,
What is
you know what Israel is going to do, and you know what, directed by Israel, the United States is probably going to do. I mean, the Central Command commander, Admiral Bradley Cooper, I think it is, and Netanyahu's boys have been tight for weeks now. So what they want to do is they want to prevent Israel being utterly destroyed. So they're probably going to, I'm just guessing here, but it's a pretty good guess. I'm guessing they're going to go initially wholesale, not for nuclear programs or the things that, we did before, or the things we might say we're going to do. They're going to go wholesale for the ballistic missiles. Everywhere they think there is a launch site, everywhere they even suspect there might be a launch site, every launch site, not just the more sophisticated ones, but the less sophisticated ones, drones, things like that, they will maximize every piece of ordnance they can, from tomahawks offshore to other missiles offshore, to ordnance dropped by airplanes, to cruise missiles fired from airplanes, to even if they were to put AC-130s or something like that over, everything will be against the ballistic missiles, because I think they understand what happened in the beautiful war. I think they understand that Iran was fairly circumspect in that, and that they could be not fairly circumspect and virtually destroy Israel and take their more or less very attuned to the rules of war and throw it out the window. In other words, kill civilians too. Go after everything in Israel. Go after the stores. Go after the discotheques. Go after the highways. Go after the railroads. Go after the everything in Israel. Kill, kill, kill. Everything. The Iranians have never been that way. Never. They just don't fight that way. Go back and look at the long war with Iraq. They tolerated all manner of things before they really got serious about, delivering it back to Saddam Hussein. And when they did, they almost went to Baghdad, which is why we threw our weight behind the UN movement to get the war stopped and everything else. We were afraid they were going to go to Baghdad. So when Iran wants to turn it loose, they will turn it loose. And look at how small Israel is. They're going to turn this fuselage with everything at its warhead capacity, everything aimed at, not just military targets, everything in Israel aimed at. They're going to turn it loose again and again and again. And I don't care what we do, even if we are able to preempt, that is to say, we get the first strike in, I think it's still going to flow. So we're looking at a different dimension of conflict here, and we're looking at the utter destruction of Israel. And when we come to that realization in Bibi Netanyahu's head, I have no doubt he will put 1 or 2 or 3 nuclear weapons on top of Iran. And he won't even talk to Donald Trump about it. He'll just do it.
Yeah. Larry, do you see Russia? Let's put it this way. I don't know if you saw, if you had the opportunity, you had the time to watch what Lavrov said in his interview on TV Breaks. He said that the United States somehow, he was frustrated by the manner of the Trump administration. He said that they're trying to, they didn't do anything in order to facilitate the relationship between Russia and the United States. He said that, Joe Biden, what the Biden administration has done, and the Trump administration didn't do anything to reverse the Biden's laws, those laws that the Biden administration. And
yeah, I agree. Trump was all mouth. He was all mouth. And to Putin's,
he put more sanction. He said even they put more sanction instead of going against those.
To Putin's discredit, and I don't mean this as an insult to Putin so much as I mean it as a comment on his elasticity, if you will. Putin tolerated it for too long, just like I think Iran tolerated this for too long. And not just Donald Trump, but a whole series of presidents Iran tolerated for too long. Now, I will say, having been somewhat privy to their buildup and their change and focus from having a fully fledged military that all components to going mostly with their ballistic missiles, watching that change was a change, in my view, of what the Iranians were willing to take anymore, because what they were doing was preparing for Armageddon. And they were preparing to come out on at least one of the winning sides, if you can say that, when the Armageddon occurred. So they've gotten smart. They've gotten very smart. And I have to put that sort of at the feet of, and people are going to excoriate me for saying this, of Islam. Islam, in the cast the Iranians give it, is not a violent religion. It's not a violent religion. And let's face it, it is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Whether or not the Iranian people still adhere to Islam or not, and I'm hearing a lot of them don't because they're sick and tired of the regime and other things, but still, it's not a hostile, warlike religion. And so this has been very difficult, I'm sure, for Iran to do this. And people tell me, well, they cut people's heads off, they hang people and all this other kind of stuff. I said, that's different. The Saudis do the same thing. They take swords and cut people's heads off. You know, it's just the way they enforce the law. It's the way they do things. It's not necessarily transferable into their approach to military action or their general approach to war. Iran has been very circumspect. They were circumspect in the big war with Iraq, which was World War One for them, and they had to come off of that eventually because they realized that human wave attacks against chemical weapons were difficult. So it's just not. It's not a society that we identify with. It isn't. We can't believe that there are people in the world who don't put war as the premier instrument that they think about on a 24/7 basis like we do, and that they fund to the tune of what? Our funding now for our national security is 10 times more than the rest of the world put together. It's incomparable what we do. So that you've got these two cultures clashing with one another, one of whom is defending itself against a fusillade of years and years of punishment by the great Satan, the empire, and the other one still can't finish it off. It can't finish it off. And now it wants to come in with people like John Bolton and General, what's his name, Keane, that ass, all talking about now's the moment, now's the moment, it's prime time, now's the time to kill them, they're falling apart, now we can kill them. And Scott Bessent saying, I killed a bunch of children, I killed a whole bunch of people, look what I did to Iran, now we can get them. That's us. That's the empire. They've taken it, and they're tired of taking it, and they're not going to take it anymore. That's a recipe for disaster for the empire and disaster for Israel, as I've pointed out. I think this is the end of Israel if we go to this war.
One of the interesting thing that was happening when I was in Iran during that cut of the internet, they were in the mainstream media outside where they were talking about that the Iranian government is using chemical weapons against the Iranian people.
You can't make this stuff. Nima, you won't believe some of the stuff I've read. I read something in the New York Times this morning. I just deleted it. I pushed the button and deleted the entire New York Times on my cell phone. The crap that they put out. And here's this supposedly premier, all the news that's fit to print, so forth, printing this crap that they haven't a clue whether it's true or not. They probably got it from this general, or they got it from the CIA or somebody else. Totally fabricated. And they do the same thing on Ukraine and Russia. I was reading the casualty figures again in the New York Times. Holy mackerel, you would think that Russia was reeling, absolutely reeling. Tomorrow morning we'll pick up the New York Times and the headline will be Putin out, Russia collapses. It's still going on.
Yeah. It's quite unbelievable. And Larry Lavrov today, in his interview with NTV, he said that the Trump has been in contact with all countries that buy oil and gas from Russia, and he wants to take over the global energy market. I don't know. And on the other hand, Bloomberg reported that the first, here is the exact text that they used. Venezuela ships first crude cargo to Israel as oil exports reopen after Maduro's ouster. How do you think that Donald Trump going in that direction, going against Russia, going against Iran? I would assume he eventually wants to get to China. He wants to do. We know what he's doing with India, with the Indian card. And how is that possible? Lavrov was not happy. You see some sort of. Today I talked with John Helmer, and he said that there is a substantial disagreement between Lavrov and Peskov, for example. Peskov is the speaker, Lavrov is foreign minister. Lavrov is not happy. He's not. He doesn't want to wrap things up in something that is not realistic. That's why he's talking, directly to the United States, to Donald Trump. And how do you see the situation in Ukraine and the escalation both in the West Asia and in Ukraine, and the interpretation on the part of the Chinese?
Let's back up for a moment. What you've just described is why I think Xi Jinping put out this last communique. And in this last communique, which is really a follow on, the third or fourth iteration of capitalism with Chinese characteristics. And what Xi Jinping said in this is really seismic, because what he said is, in essence, we have really dominated the world in two or three areas. We are he says, we are the number two economy in the world. But wait, we are the industrial giant. We are the technological giant. We are the economic giant. We are not the financial giant. The financial giant, and then he uses some Mandarin, Freeman, to give me an insight into it. But he talks about the poisonous financial system that is currently in the world. And of course, you know what he means. He means SWIFT. He means the dollar. He means the empire. And then he says, China must now become number one in finance. We will do that by making the renminbi the world's most used, trusted, and foundational currency. I didn't think he would ever go this far. He doesn't have to do very much to have that happen within a decade. So what he's saying there, in essence, in writing, and he goes on to say, we must not turn into what that other place is. We must not turn into the financial system that was created with Bretton Woods and the IMF and the WTO and all the rest of that. We must not. So we will postulate these very Confucian 5 must do's and 5 must not do's. And so he's trying to keep the system, and I think this word is well translated as righteous. He's trying to keep the system honest. So he wants to do this, but he wants to do it with a better system than what we have, because he sees ours as absolutely, absolutely corrupt. And sanctions are the biggest thing he sees as the indicator of the corruption. I don't know why the press hasn't picked up more on this. Probably because they're too stupid. But what he's saying is, in it. It also has an R in it, and it has a B in it. So, Mr. Lula, you're a full-fledged participant now. You said you wanted to be, now you can be. Russia, listen to me. India, listen to me. If you don't, you're going to be on the outside quick. And I'm the C. Guess what? We're taking over the world. And we're going to do it in the most effective and less casualty producing manner, by finishing off the empire, by becoming not only the world's number one economic, number one industrial, number one technological power, we're going to become the world's number one financial power. Take that, London. Take that, New York. Take that, Doha. If that is his purpose, and I've no doubt it is, since he's now declared it to everyone and sundry in China, then this is all a tempest in a teapot. This is the last scrap by the empire, the last mess the empire is going to be able to make, because China has just thrown down the toxin, just sounded the toxin, thrown down the gauntlet. And I don't see anything to stop them. Nothing. Certainly not Donald Trump. So while all this is going on, this is happening in the background.
Larry, I don't know if you saw the interview that Iranian foreign minister on February 7th had in Doha. He said
Yep.
that,
Yes.
yeah, he's talking about a comprehensive deal, but the core, the heart of the deal would be Palestine, would be Gaza.
He was very smart in bringing that in and making it the focus. Very smart, because 60% of the world, 60% of the world now thinks it's an abomination on the face of the earth. They mostly agree with South Africa. All these people should be hauled before the criminal court, charged, tried, and convicted, and sentenced. Netanyahu foremost of all. So he picked that issue very, very wisely.
Actually, that's what's happening in the mind of the most people I talk with. They don't see, a peace deal, a comprehensive agreement between Iran and the United States without considering Palestine, without considering Gaza. Larry, after all, what is the problem between Iran and Israel, between Iran and the United States? It's all related to Palestine. It's all about what's going on in Gaza, in the West Bank. And
Yep.
Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff together with Kushner, they did nothing considering that case.
No, they're going to profit off of it. They're going to profit off the continued death of Palestinians. We were talking about this yesterday with a friend of mine in the military, and I said, tell me when Israel stopped killing people on the West Bank, in Gaza, in Lebanon. Tell me when they've stopped. Let me know. Sound the bell. Ring it. Let me know when they stop, because they haven't stopped. They're killing 20 or 30 a day, sometimes as many as 70 or 80 a day. And nothing has changed. They're just on a lower burner. They're still killing people. That's their objective, and it will be their objective until Netanyahu is dead and buried, and maybe beyond. But I think Iran's getting ready to dead and bury Israel.
Yeah. Larry, what is your understanding of the case of Ukraine? We know it seems that on the Russian part, they really feel that the Trump administration is somehow playing around with the game, with these sort of negotiations. They don't see anything practical in the whole manner of the Trump administration, on one hand. On the other hand, we may see some sort of advance, some sort of progress in the negotiations, and bringing in the European alternative, what the Europeans would bring to the table, it all get much more complicated. And I don't see Donald Trump achieving anything anytime soon.
No. On the webinars this morning with Wolfgang Streck and Lord Sadelsky and let's see, what was her name? I wrote it down somewhere. This parliamentarian from the Revival Party, I think it's called, in Bulgaria. One of the things that I think there was consensus on was that there needs to be in Germany, and Merz, and Streck was not all that dismissive of Merz being the one who could do this if he thought it were politically palatable. There has to be a rapprochement with Moscow. They have to get to the point where they can live with initially and then accommodate in a significant way Russia and build if they're going to build any kind of new viable European security structure. Russia has to be a part of it. I thought I was back listening to Shevardnadze and Gorbachev and Powell and Bush and all the crew, Mitterrand, and they understand that here's the key. They understand that one of the impediments to that, if not a major impediment right now, is the damn EU. And that the EU has to either go through a total transformation or be destroyed. And then the discussion got into, how would the Germans coalesce around a single party or a coalition that would be able to change things and go the right way. And one of the people, maybe it was Anatole, said something about you have to be willing to rebel. And then Wolfgang said, well, the Germans, if a rebellion were going on, and a train was leading you to the rebellion, the Germans would want to buy a ticket. which is perfect. The Germans would want to buy a ticket instead of getting there. um, but they put their finger on the problem. You have to deal with Russia. You must deal with Russia. Not only is she sitting over there with the incredible hoard of gas and oil, but she's huge. And Wolfgang, I think it was, said we've tried other things before, like marching there. it didn't work. I think we should try something else. They've got to come to some accommodation. And standing in their way right now, really, is not just the EU, feckless as it is, but Donald Trump, because he's made such a freaking mess. He, Witkoff, and Kushner have made a colossal mess. They don't have good relations with Sergei Lavrov now. They don't have good relations with Putin. And it takes a lot for Donald Trump to disabuse Putin of his desire to have better relationships with Washington. But he's about to the point of doing that because he's so inept. Now, I will admit his ineptitude comes in part because of all the people who have him around the ankles. These billionaires in the background and these people who want to destroy Russia. I got news for you, dudes. 10 time zones, maybe 11 if you calculate it certain ways. You're not going to do Russia in. Many people greater than you have tried. You're not going to do them in. So you better figure out a way to come to some sort of accommodation. And it would be better if it were peaceful, included a new nuclear weapons treaty regime, and included economics, which are crucial here. And oh, by the way, you keep doing this business with tankers headed for Cuba, and you turn them around because you bring pressure on the president of Mexico or pressure in some other way. Guess what? They're going to be Russian and Chinese tankers escorted by frigates and destroyers and other ships coming to Havana. I'd be doing that already if I were Xi Jinping and Putin. I'd just say, we're going. And I dare you to stop us. You want to start a world war? We'll win it.
Yeah. I really feel the same way, Larry. I think you put it the best way possible. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Take care. Sorry about all the confusion, but I'm gonna shoot AOL tomorrow morning. Don't anybody get AOL? It's sorry.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry. See you soon.
Take care. Bye bye.